Okay, magic with a K versus magic with a C. What? Why is there this goofy Dungeons and Dragons word, magic with a K? All right, let's get into this because this is an important question. Okay, so there's one very obvious reason why, magic, as in the path of esotericism, occultism, mastering the mind, mastering your existence, all of this, esoteric spirituality. The most obvious reason why that is commonly spelled with a K, M-A-G-I-C-K, is to differentiate it from stage magic. That's the most obvious reason, okay? Because when you look up magic with a C, that means prestidigitation, which is the long way of saying stage magic, as in pulling rabbits out of hats and all of that. Now, magic with a K has a lot in common with magic with a C, but only in a metaphorical way. So let's set that aside for a second. The main reason why magic is spelled with a K is because of Aleister Crowley, who was, lots of people have different opinions about him because he was a very complicated individual and he did a lot in his life, some of which is guaranteed to rub anyone wrong because he was a kind of a wacky character. But the modern convention of spelling magic with a K comes from Crowley. He did this specifically to distinguish what he refers to as the art and science of causing change in conformity with will, which is his definition of magic, and it's a really good one, from stage magic. That's the most obvious answer. So here's the thing. Crowley didn't actually come up with that term. The spelling of magic with a K was actually started by Daniel Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe, which you may remember. You may remember the Disney movie. And magic with a K is a spelling that's been around at least since the Renaissance. It's kind of like the Old English way of spelling it, but it was one that was taken up by literati like Defoe and used for this reason. And if you actually look back in Western history, you can see that a lot of really recognizable people have been engaged in this. I mean, back to, for a long time, magic has been particularly of interest to artists, writers, the literati, often parts of European and English nobility. There's a long history of creative or alternatively thinking people being interested in magic. So that's basically the reason. And is it kind of goofy? Yeah. Does it seem a little bit Dungeons and Dragons? Yeah. Should you really be engaging in magic if you're afraid of what other people might think of you? No. And so I think that in that way, it forms kind of an interesting test. I mean, you gotta be willing to be a bit of a fool, like the Fool card in the tarot. You kind of gotta be willing to be made fun of. You kind of gotta be willing to think differently if you're gonna engage in material like this, because it's, let's face it, it's so far outside of the bounds of what people think is possible or what people think is reasonable and decent for a respectable society, because people don't want to go outside of that. And part of it is because they're scared, but the other reason is people really do not like the idea that their life might be their responsibility. They don't like that idea. And it's not just magic, it could be by any other name, just the idea of discipline or work or going to therapy or whatever it is that people do to improve themselves, and not just improve themselves, but take control, take responsibility for their own life. This is really scary for people. People would much rather it be somebody else's responsibility and go along to get along and just do the bare minimum. And this is why, unfortunately, our planet, our species is not nearly as awesome as it could be. And that's just the human nature. It's been that way forever. So that's a main reason people don't like the idea, because it challenges their assumptions. Just the word itself kind of rattles them and forces them to evaluate what they believe might be true about reality. Because even if you reject it, you still have to suddenly do an evaluation of like, how could somebody say that? That's not real. And maybe you go off in a totally atheist, scientist, the path of scientism and all that, and that's fine. Believe me, I'm the first person that will tell you we don't need everyone into mystic ideas. We need lots more scientific and purely rational thinkers. That would be great. I'm all for that. That would be great. I'm all for that. But even in coming in contact with the idea of magic, it forces you to at the very least reject it. And that can cause a bit of an instant crisis, right? It can make you react to it, or maybe it fascinates you, or maybe you reject it and you're fascinated at the same time. And now you're kind of wrestling with that and struggling with that and trying to figure out what that means. So at the very least, the word should harden your materialist outlook. And if that's all it does, I'm happy. Good for you. We need lots more people like you in the world. We need lots more purely rational, purely logical, purely scientific, purely material people in the world. We need more because in my opinion, there's actually too much superstition and mysticism and craziness in the world right now. I think sometimes people's minds are too open. But magic itself is actually a very precise, empirical, and in its own way, science-like, if not scientific, path of investigating consciousness in the human mind. And we need people like that too. We need people who are willing to dedicate themselves to exploring the limits of consciousness and of reality in a subjective, if not objective sense. So by its very nature, the word should cause a change in you, whether to harden into materialism or to entice you into seeing if there might be some truth to these claims. So for that reason, I like the word magic quite a bit. And that's why it's spelled with a K. To learn lots more, you can see more at my school, magick.me. That is magic with a K, magick.me. And we have classes on the entire range of the magical tradition there. It's all laid out for you step by step, so you can skip all the occulting and get straight to practice. All right, I will see you in class.